people in as we go. So as you see, there is a recording in process. We will be sharing this after the talk. So welcome to those of you that registered, and welcome to those of you that are watching the recording. I am Jenny Woodworth, a licensed independent social worker and the Director of Programs for Courage to Caregivers. Glad to be here tonight to talk about caregiver essentials, caring for the entire family. So again, housekeeping. As you saw, we are recording our program tonight. We may not have time for live questions yet. If you do have follow-up questions, feel free to add them to the chat. We are monitoring that, and we will get to those as we can. Know that we did receive questions submitted prior to the event, and we'll include as many as we can. We were not able to include all of them in the presentation due to time limitations. Hopefully you will get your questions answered here and then some tonight. So I'm going to take just a minute to tell you a little bit about what Courage to Caregivers does to support family caregivers. Courage to Caregivers is a nonprofit located in Northeast Ohio with the mission to provide hope, support, and courage to caregivers and loved ones of those living with mental illness and really chronic illness as well. We are now serving caregivers nationwide. We focus exclusively on the caregiver and see ourselves in the caregiver burnout prevention business. We offer 2 programs, currently at no cost to the participant. All programs are now virtual. So we have peer support, either through our kind of long-term peer support that we've had for quite a while, or through our fairly new certified family peer support program. Much more on that later. This program matches caregivers in need with trained volunteers or staff who have experience caring for someone living with mental illness, chronic illness, someone who has navigated systems and who is a heck of a listener, and someone who can also help connect you with services that you need. Our weekly coaching groups are co-facilitated by a licensed social worker and another trained peer specialist. We truly believe in the power of peer support here at Courage to Caregivers. Our coaching group model provides essential tools to build a caregiver's resilience. While staffed by therapists, we do not provide therapy or counseling. Again, these are coaching groups, not therapy groups. So feel free to reach out to us after this call or after this webinar about our services. But right now, I'd like to introduce the other lovely person on this screen, Tameika Wright, who works at NAMI Ohio as the Family Peer Support Training Coordinator. Tameika became an avid experiential learner as she sought to advocate for her daughter, who lives with extensive medical and mental health needs. As she explored the complexity of navigating the child-serving systems, she developed a passion for assisting other families. After 10 years as a family peer supporter and direct advocacy with families in crisis, Tameika has developed a passion for assisting new family peer supporters on their journey with assisting the overwhelming number of families in need. So thank you so much for being here, Tameika.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so I know I just literally read your bio, but I was hoping before we got too much into the evening, you could share just a little bit more about your story. So, why you were called to do this work around families, if you don't mind.
No problem. Well, again, as I mentioned, my daughter started off with some really significant medical needs. I noticed that she was not developing. She is my 3rd of 5 children. So she has 2 older brothers. And I started noticing things that were just not normal for me as a parent. And I consistently was raising the alarm with the medical community. And I felt slightly disregarded. Everything was normalized. But as a parent, and one of the things I encourage parents to do is when something doesn't feel right for your child, trust your instincts. So when I was desperate because there were no answers for why these very odd, isolated things were happening with my daughter, I just took her in for emergency services. Let's just do some blood work. And they said, well, what do you want us to say? General illness? as a parent, I didn't care what they had to say. Whatever you need to put down, general illness. And that led us to understand that at age 5, my daughter had a rare adult form of leukemia. There's no treatment protocol in place. It became a very big research study. They hired in pharmacists to come from St. Jude and OSU, and we were at Nationwide Children's to collaborate to determine how to best treat my daughter. And I'll forever be grateful because, she is still here when they did not give a good prognosis. But it
Wow.
did lead to some outcomes, some cognitive latency and some learning disabilities, post chemo and radiation.
Wow.
It led to what began as what seemed to be depression and anxiety after long hospitalizations. But once again, as a parent, I sensed something else was happening.
Mm.
And I continued to push and continued to push. And I took her into her primary care to see their social worker because I was really concerned with some of the things that I was seeing. She was seeing a psychologist routinely, but I was really concerned at what I was seeing. And she was lapsing into catatonia.
Mm.
So that was truly our first true experience with mental health. Her first hospitalization was over 6 weeks. With treating the catatonia, she did end up eventually with a diagnosis of early onset schizophrenia. I was floored. And the first thing I can say is during our medical stay, that was my first experience with peer support.
Mm.
Hematology oncology was one of the most family-centered places before I believe there was a term coined for it. And as we got our diagnosis, literally, there were family members waiting in the wings that came in at that point of devastation to
Mm.
ask me, what do you need right now? It's one of the things that I remember most is this person who did not know me, did not know my background, knew nothing about me other than this is another parent in pain, and the pain that I felt when my child received a diagnosis. And they embraced us. It very much so became a community. Our kids did things together, they experienced things together, we had outings together. You would see each other as you came into the clinic for care, and you recognized people.
Mm.
And it was very much so a community.
Wow.
When we lapsed, when we first endeavored uh, our stays with behavioral health, some people don't understand when I say in some ways that was even more scary
Mm.
because so many people were invested in saving my daughter's body. They were all there. When we started in with behavioral health, I felt like I was literally fighting for my daughter's soul, for the essence of who she was as a person. And that same response was not there. It was probably one of the loneliest, almost degrading
Mm.
periods of my life. And I just remember making a desperate plea as we sat there. And I said, if I could stop one other family from feeling how I felt at that moment, I
Mm.
would do it. And I say, watch what you declare because you'll be held to
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
it. So that became my first step. When my daughter first started in behavioral health, parents and siblings and things were allowed on the floors. They were allowed to visit. They were allowed around other families. And I found myself just stopping and talking to other families. How are you? You
Mm.
know, how are you coping? Was there anything you needed? And it really started that process. When the opportunity came around, I started working in family peer support under a healthcare innovations grant that was offered by Medicaid. And they wanted to know if family support and mental health would improve outcomes. Would it reduce hospital stays? Would it increase their consistency with attending appointments? Would it help them link with other resources? So they started this healthcare innovations grant, and I was encouraged to apply by my daughter's home-based worker. And I just remember telling her, why would I want to tell anybody what to do? Because my life is a hot mess right now. At any given moment, I'm in crisis. And she actually turned around and said, that's why you want to do it. Because the fact that you realize that this is your new reality, that crisis can be a reality, but you're still standing and you are still performing and you are still living, gives other people hope when they are in a really low place. From there, I felt kind of bullied into it. So I interviewed on a Wednesday. I got a call back on a Friday, and I got an offer by Monday. So it was almost a railroad. Like, we're not going to let you think too hard about it. And that started my work at Nationwide Children's Hospital. So,
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you for that intro, because that is, I was like, I know she's got a different intro than that one. Although I love, again, the child serving systems. I love some of the terminology. I was like, I want to hear the meat, as my daughter would say. I want to hear the meat of the story. So thank you for sharing that.
and what I
So
can also tell you is it also let me know and empathize with families about how quickly this impacts the entire family.
mhm.
Because my original career was in anesthesia technology. And when I moved to Ohio, and Ohio didn't accept national credentials. So they wanted you to get state credentials. And for my state credentials, there was one extra class they wanted me to take. My daughter got ill before I ever had a chance to take that class. So it changed my whole life trajectory. And it it gave me such compassion for
Yeah.
people who feel lost. What am I going to do now?
Mm. Thank you. So we invited you here today because this is Purposeful Parenting Month. But I mean, I know I have folks on this call, and that our agency supports all types of caregivers across a variety of caring relationships. I wonder if you could help, how do you translate purposeful parenting to purposeful caregiving for, again, the purpose of this call, and the purpose of, many of the folks that are going to watch this recording or are watching this live?
Well, I believe that all our relationships are purposeful. You
Mhm.
know, everyone we come to, every family member, every child, every coworker, every friend have a different set of skills and a different set of proficiency in all areas of life.
Mm.
My goal was to always look to highlight what is really strong in them and to really be kind and support areas that they need extra help in. I have 5 biological children, but I've been the bonus mom to several others,
Mhm.
and all of them are so very, very different. You
Mhm.
know, I have a child who, if they brought me a B, I'd ask them what happened. Did you study? Did you do this? Did you do that? I have another child where if they brought me a C minus, I was dancing a jig. I was so excited. Some way to go, dude. Because he struggled with attention and they were not able to find a medication that really assisted him, really well without it triggering migraines.
Mhm.
So he said, I'd rather not have a headache every day and do my best than to feel sick every day and I still can't concentrate. So I look at everyone, not by some set standard that I set, but very purposefully is how can our interactions really support you at your best.
I love that. So really strengths-based, really individualized.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I believe that, and I don't know if you've ever heard the quote, and I believe people said it was by Einstein, but if we judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its entire life thinking it was stupid.
Hmm.
So I want my fish to swim. I want my birds to fly, you know, and I want everybody to really highlight what they're good at
Yeah,
and to just be supportive for ways that they need extra support.
that's great. I love that. I love that pivot from purposeful parenting to purposeful caregiving. Thank you.
Mhm.
So, we've touched on it again because of your story, but I wonder whether you could do just kind of a high level overview of what peer support kind of is, what kind of peer supports, like what kind of peer support is out there, and what's different about the peer support that you've really championed, this family peer support. It's kind of a multi-level question. I hope if I,
Yes, it is.
yeah.
So peer support in other realms has been around for many, many years. And actually, in many states, they have championed peer support for a multitude of reasons. Peer support to me at every realm is about having that shared lived experience, that understanding of the devastation that families may go through when they encounter uh, different situations. Currently, there is a very strong peer support in the veteran community.
Mhm.
There is peer support for adults for mental health and substance use. There is peer support for medical complications. There is peer support for uh, PICU or pediatric intensive care, or families that are consistently hospitalized with a baby that has extensive needs. Um, there is youth peer support, which is very unique because it is youth that have grown up in the system or lived with their own mental health, substance use, had experience maybe with children's services or juvenile justice, throughout their youth. And after they turn 18, they have stabilized, they go back and offer support to youth that are struggling. They can do that up until, I believe, age 30. And then there's us as family, and family peer support is essentially caring for the caregivers, understanding that we have an identified person who's in crisis, but understanding that it's causing a very significant and different crisis for the parent or the caregiver, as well as the family as a whole, and really encouraging that self-care, looking at things from the lens of the crisis that may be surrounding the crisis. So how do we best support the parent and possibly who as they are supporting the child and the other youth in the home. So when that parent is able to really navigate their crisis situation, to really process the things that are going on and be given that safe space to do it, they're in such a better place to support their child and the other family members that may be impacted by that situation. So I hope that, I mean, I wish I could name every form of peer support, but it's so strong and it is coming up everywhere. There are whole national organizations that just focus on peer support, family to family, medical, now going into mental health and other things. The National Federation of Families, you have Friendly, you have organizations that understand this is of extreme importance and really does support best outcomes.
Yeah, that's great. We were at the same conference and someone was talking about peer support being provided to incarcerated individuals. And I thought,
Absolutely.
that really makes a lot of sense. And what
Yes.
an important work that is. So
I'm
yeah.
glad you said that because incarcerated individuals is one of the next steps that I see for family peer support. Because
Say a little more about that.
as families are reunited, they're going to need to understand and really help to navigate the systems that their children have ended up in.
Mm.
As they are incarcerated, a lot of times there is counseling going on. There are still decisions to be made, especially if they just have a family member that took over. They still have the right to help make decisions, and the processing. Because one of the things I do is there's no shame about how we got to where we are, but we do need to process how we ended up here. So processing that my actions may have caused significant trauma for my children.
Mhm.
And we're now encountering some challenges behind that. And being able to do that without the shame and blame, and from a very proactive standpoint of where can we go now, I feel like it will be key as families are reunited.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to watch. Important work. I
Well, in
think
Ohio Start, I don't know if you've ever heard of Ohio Start.
I don't think so.
Ohio Start is an organization that is really focused on uh, moms that have been incarcerated recently, and they may be out on parole and things, and they are given a family peer supporter to help that family plan and that family reintegration. So I believe their plan was to hire 56 family peer supporters throughout the state of Ohio. But I was so excited to hear that. We're also seeing it in specialty areas. Neomed is looking at family peer support. Okali has family peer support. So, Okali, of course, being autism and low incidence uh, uh, diagnosis,
Mhm.
and Neomed, first break psychosis, which is, I'm so excited to see.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. We talked about these child serving systems. I wonder whether you could talk a little bit more, and you've touched on this, but anything else you'd like to add about, your experience in finding a support network, and I guess maybe, both formal and informal, and again, where peer support kind of fell in there for you.
Well, I'm going to be honest, I had a great support network for our medical complications.
Right.
Um, I really did not have a great support network for when we were really navigating mental health in our early stages, which is what made me so passionate. I just felt this is not okay.
Mm.
So where there wasn't one, I just made one because I was just too stubborn to let it go. Yeah, just just for lack of better words, I was way too stubborn to let it go. So it started off very, very informal. My first support network was probably when I got hired on the children's. I was one of five family peer supporters that was hired on, and in 2012. And we really did become each other's support network for quite a long time. It was a breath of fresh air to be able to really talk to someone and be able to share my thoughts, my feelings, whether they were negative, positive, whatever. I didn't have to feel bad about how I felt because it just was. And
Mm,
feeling that no matter what I said in that moment in my venting, it was not a reflection of my character. It was not a reflection of my story. It really was allowing me that safe space. And that was so important. I grew up in a family where mental health wasn't really discussed. Um, we if I had family members that lived with any type of significant mental health needs, it was never obvious. Um, and so my first real experience was with my daughter. And then it actually did lapse into then with my spouse at the time. Um, the constant turmoil uh, led me to believe that the life of the party wasn't just the life of the party. He was actually living with bipolar disorder.
mhm,
And so while I was trying to manage my daughter's illness, I also was finding myself trying to manage his dual diagnosis. He was not receiving treatment and he was self-medicating. And so while I was trying to navigate that, I was also really trying to support him through his journey. Um, and so there really wasn't a good support network. And I guess that's why I am so passionate about having new family peer supporters trained, ready to go, um, being able to step outside of their worldview and step into someone else's shoes and see the experience from their perspective and not their own. That is really key to, I feel, that true support.
mm. Wonderful. Thank you for building what you built it. Because again, I think it's all happened for a reason, right? I mean, it's
Well, yeah, it happened for a reason. And I know, I live by you're never brought to something you can't be brought through.
okay.
And so I know our journey will not be in vain.
Mhm,
I share that with my daughter every day.
mhm,
Her journey, her struggles will not be in vain.
mm,
So I don't know what the final outcome is. I know at one point I was told she would never live outside an institution, and I was encouraged to have her placed in residential treatment.
mm,
And I declined because, again, I am big on, as a parent, trust your gut instinct with your child. And my gut instinct said, if I placed my child in a residential facility, she was going to deteriorate and I wasn't going to get her back. And so we just determined that we're going to bring her home and we're going to figure it out. And that's what we did. Now, I looking back now, she has two older brothers, two younger brothers, and we have had maybe three other kids that kind of wandered in and out of our home during different times.
mhm,
I look and I understand how much it has shaped their lives.
mhm,
I have a police officer who married a prison social worker. I have a son who works in adult mental health.
mm,
Um, I have a son who's in the military and supports other soldiers that might be struggling.
mm. It's doing peer support. Yeah.
And without even realizing,
Uh-huh.
very informally. And I have a younger son who just wonders how he fits into this family. Like, you just found me under a tree.
That's fine, right? I love that. Well, that's a great segue to our next question about, this journey, these severe illnesses, they can consume the whole family, you know, and like you said, kind of shape their futures in some ways. So, I mean, I don't want to give caregivers one more thing to do because Lordy, we know you all have a lot to do. But if you could speak just a minute to like, how can caregivers best support their whole family, partners, siblings of the person, or whoever, however, you know, whoever shows up with in that relationship of care, how can the caregiver, you know, support everyone the best they can? Speak to that, please.
If I could go back and talk to a younger me, I would really say everybody's entitled to feel the way they feel.
Yeah.
You know, it might not be ideal, but it's not right or wrong. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to acknowledge the impact it has on others' lives.
Mhm.
Um, Acknowledge it and empathize for their pain, their loss, their experience. Um, and then see what accommodations can
Mm.
be put in place.
Mhm.
I'll give you a for instance. My two older boys were very athletic. They were playing sports from kindergarten. If there was a season, there was a sport. I just felt I kept them busy. I wanted them active. I wanted them to be social. They were in scouts. They played football, baseball. We played floor hockey, wrestling. You know, we did all of them. When I encountered my daughter's devastation and that tremendous setback, and then my ex-husband also struggled, I was tapped out of energy for how to still make that happen for them. Thinking of my younger self, that was their coping mechanism.
Mm.
They needed that. But I did not have the energy or an extra hour of the day to always make that happen. And it even rolled on to my younger kids even more because I don't think they had an opportunity to do their first organized anything until they were in upper middle school. So almost their socialization was different.
Yeah.
And I look at that and see the impact of it. I see the impact of having taken that away, not intentionally, but from my kids. And I think some of that came from the isolation of the situation. Now, was some of it real? Probably. Was some of it self-imposed? Absolutely.
Mhm.
Because we're not always conditioned to reach out for help or to say that I may be lacking anything for my kids. I'm superwoman. You know, I can do it all. I don't need to ask anyone for help. And I'd say it is okay to ask for help. It
Mhm.
is okay to seek out your tribe because while you feel so isolated and feel like nobody understands what I'm going through, you have an infinite amount of parents out there that are saying the same thing.
Mm.
Parents, supports, organizations, you know, reach out to coaches, to schools, to teachers, you know, people that could be supportive if they understood what the situation is. You know, and I think that would be what I would say to my younger self is I know it makes you feel vulnerable, but through that vulnerability comes the resources you usually need.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. That's a great answer. And it just strikes me as, you know, you were talking about your family of origin, how, you know, mental health isn't something that people talked about and how much that had to change in your, you know, your family of creation.
Mhm.
there was no choice. This had to be a topic of conversation. So I'm almost like, thank goodness, because it's, that open conversation. I think a lot of this to me comes down to communicating, again, needs,
Absolutely.
and needs and expectations and limitations for all of you as a family. So thank you for that. I'm coming towards the end of my questions, but one I want to end with, and I'm going to add a second piece to it once you've answered it, because I just thought of it as we were talking. But I know you are obviously awesome at answering questions on the fly. But if you were to give advice, and you talked a little bit about yourself as like a younger caregiver, so someone who's just starting out as a family caregiver, what advice would you give? Anything you can add to kind of your last answer?
Allow yourself to feel. Um, there were so many times because of the negative feelings I was having. I kind of berated myself as a bad parent. What good parent, what good caregiver would feel that way? Allow yourself to feel. And the second thing I would say is don't isolate yourself.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, behavioral health is not the easiest place to find resources. They're not the easiest systems to navigate, but make it a journey, make it a decision to really seek out that help and that support that's available. Because isolating yourself compounded things. Um, it's a hole that's so difficult to dig out of.
Mhm.
And so finding and actively reaching out for that help, or allowing yourself that vulnerability when that help reaches out to you,
Mhm.
can truly change your journey, you
Love it.
know. And if I think back to even my medical um, side with peer support, if I really would have connected those dots, I would have understood that, because there were so many things like she had to be on Ensure. She wasn't eating Ensure and high priced drinks so much, and my insurance only covered so much, and she needed like 3 times that amount a month. Being able to voice that, no problem, we got you. We're gonna do this. Or I don't have adequate transportation back and forth to these appointments. No problem. We're gonna help you with this. And they made those dots connect for me. There's no one plan that's going to be universal for every family. But when you can voice what the gap or the need is with your family and your circumstances, a lot of times there is help there to help fill it. So allow yourself that vulnerability of speaking up and not isolating yourself and voicing what you.
Great, thank you. And my bonus question is, what about those caregivers who are not new to this journey, who are slogging through either their marathon, their Appalachian Trail, however you want to look at this long-term, long-distance journey? What what can you give to them right now? Because I know they're out there listening to this.
Absolutely. I'd say honestly, understand that you can't be everything. And that is what we are used to being. So when you need to fill a gap, be okay with filling it and taking your hands off, even if it's not always ideal.
Yeah.
Um, my daughter, game changer for us was her getting a case manager. Now, it's not a good time for case managers right now, but her having a case manager allowed me to take my hands off and just step back and enjoy being a mom.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and so I'd say be okay with understanding that you can't be everything to your loved one. And you have to reach out and allow those supports to come in and serve a purpose in life. And at this point, it's okay to pat yourself on the back and say, soldier, well done, because your self-care is essential to you continuing to be able to be there in any capacity.
Mm.
I think up until a few years ago, every single vacation day I had was spent on someone else's crisis.
Mm. Mhm.
I literally had no vacation, not a family vacation, not anything for probably 14 years.
Yeah.
And that in itself will take its toll.
Mhm.
Be okay, not even with just the big things. Be okay with your time during the day. Be purposeful about giving yourself that time to take care of you, not you, the mom, not you, the spouse, you, the sibling, you, the daughter, you, whoever you were. And it's taken me a while to get back in touch with Tameika because I wore so many other hats and I hadn't put that one on in so long. So be okay with putting the you hat on. And if you're like me, when somebody came to me and talked about self-care and I got angry and said, you just gave me one more thing to do in my 26-hour a day, one more thing to do. And I got angry, but I realized I was not functioning at my best self. And when I was kind to me, and when you can be kind to yourself and allow yourself that time and that space of self-care, that whether you call it selfish or not, be selfish about
Mhm.
it, that you just command, you come back such a better person and so much more capable of handling the challenges that are going to come your way.
Thank you. Do you have anything else you'd like to add? Otherwise, I can turn it over to, if you're okay with getting questions from the
Oh,
live.
sure,
Anything else you
sure.
add, Tameika?
Um, I would say that peer support in itself is a community. And even as you work in peer support, as you find yourself advocating at any amount of levels, open yourself up to the different forms of advocacy that are around you. We none of us should be operating in a silo as a parent, as an advocate, as a peer supporter, or any at any ever other level. Community is so important. And we can't and we're not expected to have all the answers. So be okay with depending on someone else's knowledge, experience, and just knowing that there is a whole community and tribe out there that you can build that will help you so much.
Great. Beautiful. Thank you. So I'd invite any of you to put any questions you might have for Tameika in the chat. We could also pause recording if you would like to perhaps even come off mute. So totally your all's call. Christy's here to help with tech. I am also here to help as well. So we'll just pause here and see whether anyone has any questions.
And I would encourage anyone. I am a pretty open book. So if it seems personal or invasive, I won't take it that way. It's my journey uh from illness. And I should have said my oldest son lived with attention deficit, uh, no hyperactivity, but attention deficit disorder. And I originally thought that was really hard. And little did I know that was a dress rehearsal for what was to come. So I see how do you stay positive and hold hope when things feel hard and overwhelming? Mine is through my faith. Um, in my faith, again, I've carried the thought there is nothing that we will be brought to that we can't be brought through.
Mhm.
And so we hold the hope that this is for the moment. This is not forever. You know, we that this is just part of our journey and we can make it. I feel like we learn to pull together more during those times of extreme hardship. Um, and my positivity is that we are always going to come out on the other side of whatever is happening. And even if what what happened wasn't ideal, there's a reason and there's a purpose to that pain. And I'm just holding out for it. That is that is my thoughts on that. And honestly, through so much of my journey that was so painful and so difficult, probably my trauma response was I compartmentalized. And so I'm able to kind of put things in a box and put it away to examine later. Unfortunately, sometimes later doesn't come too often, but until it has to. But that is what we do, and we just know that there to all the pain, there's going to be a purpose, and if we don't see it, we're going to make it. I did see a question
Yeah,
about my daughter.
yeah, I'm curious too. So yeah, how old is your daughter and is she still living with you today?
My daughter is 28 years old now, and I was told at age 5 that she was not going to make it. Sometimes you got to say the devil's a liar, you know. She is 28 years old. She is still living with me, not because I don't want to allow her to launch, but because the wait list for appropriate housing is so incredibly long. And she doesn't need group home, but she does need supportive housing where there's built-in case management and things. So we have walked, and because she's not at risk of being homeless, she doesn't take priority. So we are number 2 on the list. Excuse me. We are number 2 on the list. Um, she holds the hope on what that means because it's been a long journey, but she is ready, and I am ready to support her as she tries to transition to that independent living.
Exciting. Thanks for sharing.
Yes.
I was like, oh, I really want to ask this, but someone did for me. So thank you.
Yes, 28. My kids right now range in age from 32 to 22.
Cool. Anyone else have any questions?
Well, and if you do, I encourage you, my contact information will be available. Um, please feel free to reach out. Uh, is it different caring for a young adult versus other family members, parents, siblings? Yes, to some degree. I think it really um, depends on at what age they became ill. My daughter became ill at such a young age. She was used to me being an advocate for her, and that was her normal. When you have a young adult, a parent, a sibling, um, who you're now finding yourself needing to step in for care, and they've been used to being autonomous in their journey, sometimes that can feel like a battle. And, especially if they are not necessarily on board with you needing or trying to take a lead in that situation. I feel like when you have a child, especially from childhood, they're used to you making decisions for them. They're more open to that. Some team members are more open to that. My daughter still has um, psychiatry and clinicians that will still reach out for my opinion. We have releases in place. We have, these things in place where we still discuss what's going on. And I feel able to reach out to them as a team to say, I'm concerned about something that's happening. And I feel like they're very responsive to that. But I don't know that that would be the same if I stepped into her journey if she was 22, 24 when she first lapsed. I know it was not my experience with my ex-husband,
Mhm.
not at all. So yes, I felt where he was concerned, I felt a lot more helpless. Um, and I felt like I was doing a lot more cleanup work because until he reached a point of truly not being able to make decisions for himself, I felt unheard. So that was a very hard place to be.
Mhm. Thanks.
See, did anyone else have any further questions?
I don't think so. Christy, do you have any questions? Yeah, looks like she's got a finger up. Maybe someone else does, or she does.
Someone sent a private question, so I'll read it for them. Because I'm not able to cut and paste right now. How did you support your other children who were impacted? And do you know of any resources for them?
Absolutely.
This person's children are young adults now, and this person wants to know if you had any guilt for not being as available to the others as you were for your daughter. So how do you deal with that guilt? Wow, there are a lot of questions in here, but I know you can do it.
Yes, absolutely. I was riddled with guilt. As I said, as I look back and I think about so many of the childhood experiences I was able to really allow my older children to have that I just out of lack of energy, lack of connectedness with resources, did not happen the same for my younger children. It caused their experience to be very, very different. And yes, I feel a tremendous amount of guilt for that. Or I felt, it now I understand and I've offered myself some grace that I could only do what I knew. Okay. And I was in survival. And so all I couldn't plan. All I could do was figure out how to get through today. And I give myself grace for being at that point. And I think now that they're adults, they also give grace for being at that point. Um, because, they're all young adults now. And just being able to say, I did the best I could, and, and again, you can't necessarily make up for it, but you can acknowledge it and acknowledge their experience. And supports for the other kids, I really encourage them. The first supports I really got for them was I started allowing them to have sessions with my daughter with her home-based, sorry, my home, her home-based worker. And I allowed them to be educated on the condition that was really causing the symptoms. This is what's causing the symptoms. That education took them from feeling like, why does my sister have to act so weird, to my sister lives with a brain condition and this is what it looks like sometimes. It took them from being afraid and really resentful to understanding that just like if I have a cold, I sneeze and cough, these were symptoms of what she was living with. And I think that gave them a lot of grace. Now, even my son, who's a police officer, before he went to be a police officer, he worked at Children's Hospital with me as security for the inpatient units and things, and always had good rapport because at an early age, he learned how to communicate with his sister. And I'm sorry, I have a baby that's being very demanding. So, he learned really well how to communicate. The one thing that I would say is educate, educate, educate. There are some support groups. There are groups like, NAMI has a group called Next Gen, which is really geared towards, they also had Youth Move, which is geared toward not only youth that lived with their own brain-based disorders and things, but also their siblings and things to really address the stigma, to be able to voice their feelings, to understand it from a deeper perspective. We have youth now that are setting up NAMI on campus to as family members for those that might be living with brain-based disorders. NAMI itself has support groups, family to family, which are family members that are supporting, someone who lives with a brain-based disorder. So just like that identified patient has a support system, it is okay for them to reach out and I encourage them to have that support system. Hopefully that answered. I should have brought those resources, but yes, NAMI Next Gen, family to family, um, family support group, those are those people that have that opportunity to really discuss not only the crisis they're encountering with their loved one, but the crisis that it's really causing in their life.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Okay, well, I think unless anyone has anything else, I think this will be our ending point. So on behalf of Courage to Caregivers, Tameika, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for just being, again, an open book, so approachable, so informative. Thank you so much. And again,
thank you for having me, and no problem. Again, if someone would like contact information will be provided. We're here. Thank you so much for what you do and what you provide. I will always be one of your biggest champions.
Thanks, Tameika. Take care, everyone.